Hi, I'm Melanie. I'm here with Steve of Wolves at the Gate. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
Good. So the first question you've probably been asked before, but the name Wolves at the Gate carries a lot of imagery with it.
hmm
What inspired the name and how does it relate to your music and overall message?
Yeah. So, yeah, naming a band is like one of the worst things you have to do if you want to start a band because, you're going to be stuck with it for a while. Um,
Mm,
but what we decided was, so like for us as a band, I was brought up Christian and I was brought up in church. But I had a really big like misunderstanding of what like Christianity even was. And I honestly just I knew nothing. I thought I knew what I believed and I had no idea. And what I started to
mm,
realize too is that a lot of that was the same all across a lot of our country, just because of the way that religion has been used or misrepresented, or yeah,
mm,
used for people's personal gain. And as I started to understand what I actually truly believed, I felt compelled, and the guys in the band felt compelled to kind of use our music to help people have a more appropriate or clear understanding of what the gospel is and what the gospel is about. And
mm,
in so like really a long time ago, like 2,000 years ago, there was a man named Paul. He was a part of like starting what is the early Christian church, and he was warning some of the new believers. He said, "When I leave, savage wolves will try to come in," and he was talking about people who would try to come in and distort the truth of the gospel. And so he said, "Be on your
mm,
guard." And I just always thought that was interesting. And so when we made our first album, our title track was called "We Are the Ones," and is basically loosely based off of that scripture. And at the end of it, we said, "We are not the wolves at the gate. We are the ones who face them." And so we were kind of trying to plant our flag in the sand, so to speak, and
mm.
let people know who we were and what we are about. And that's the band name.
Yeah. So you've got an album coming up,
hmm
Wasteland. Can you talk about the creative process behind it? Is there any themes or messages you're trying to convey through the whole album?
Yeah. So, well, yeah. So the creative process, you know, we s- every time you finish an album, there's always like a little bit of a lull in between when you start writing again. It's usually not that long for me because I just love writing. And as I was working on what would be this next record, we just had so many songs, and I was like, I really need a way to like figure out what direction we're supposed to go and what it should sound like. Um, and I kind of had the idea to sort of create this world, and that's where the Wasteland starts, is kind of just create this world and use it all as a metaphor for messaging. And really, this album Wasteland is kind of painting a picture of through different means of imagery and metaphor of how I understand the world. Um, and really a lot of it is just the brokenness that's in this world, kind of seeing it for what it is, and also seeing it in myself, and seeing that I'm also a part of that I'm not the squeaky clean person who is not been affected by the brokenness of this world. I've also been a part of things that are broken. And so
Mm.
that's sort of the world we're trying to paint with the Wasteland, almost in a sense that by the time you get to the end of the album, you're thinking, I want to get out of the wasteland. And that's kind of the that's sort of the rough, I would say, short version of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a favorite song or lyrics from Wasteland? Is there anything that kind of stands out that has a special meaning to you?
Yeah, I mean, I there's a song on the album called Memento Mori. Um,
Mm,
and really it's just a Latin phrase for essentially like don't forget that we all die, essentially, or don't forget that life is a vapor. And I think that, there's a lot of like themes of sort of like the mortality of of man in the album. But the
Mm.
reason why I love that song in particular is I think that's that's a thought that like everybody has to deal with, and it is like a really daunting reality that kind of just like sits in the back of your mind. Um, and it can feel pretty hopeless and scary. And I just really love the way that the verse and the chorus of Memento Mori work with each other. And really the chorus is just, it kind of just like breaks into this like big anthem of hope, really. And for
Mm.
us, really what we're hoping to see is that like God is not, he's not ignorant to our sorrow and our suffering. And it actually says that he's near to the brokenhearted. And so it was like a nice glimmer of like light and hope in the midst of this sort of like dark world that we're trying to create in the wasteland. And so yeah, I think that's like a band favorite, that track. So
Okay. Yeah. How did you come up with the idea for the short film for Parasite?
well, the thing that was neat about that is so I sort of like wrote out um a story, um like you would more so read it like in a novel or a short story. And
Mhm.
when we were talking to um, Garrett and Kevin, who they were the visual side of the creative, Garrett took this like short story that I wrote, and he really just developed this really awesome script that, because I don't know how to write a script or anything like that. I have no idea. That's not my skill set at all.
Yeah.
And he really just like took it and um, brought all of his creativity and his perspective to how we could bring that to life visually and in a unique way, and really to not focus so much on things that I think in music videos that can, it can just be all about like action and things being big and epic, but to maybe focus on like a more emotional, emotive aspect. And that's where the actors just completely crushed it. And they were so good. I was floored. I was just like standing there, just like had like chills watching them act. I've never really seen like people like act like that before. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Based
man,
on something you wrote, you know?
yeah. And even
Yeah.
beyond that, just for people to be able to express themselves like that, like I know I would just be a really bad actor. And so to
Mhm.
see people sort of take on this other character and convey these emotions in a really real and beautiful way was really powerful for me. And so we were just really grateful to kind of have an opportunity to do storytelling in a much, we like to do that with songs, but we actually got to like actually tell a story like you would in a short film. So it was really cool.
Yeah. So as a band, how do you navigate the balance between staying true to your roots, but also experimenting with new sounds?
Yeah, I guess for us it's probably different for every musician, but staying true to our roots isn't really that difficult, because it's almost like something like I can't help but have been inspired by the music I was inspired by, growing up. And it's like it's
Yeah.
in you, it's like you can't not make it in you, because it kind of shapes who you are. you know
Mhm.
I just grew up listening to the bands I grew up listening to, and because that's where my tastes were. And so there's a sense in which like for myself, I see that I can't escape it, but it's a good thing because those are bands that I love and I'm inspired by. The things that I try to do is to not rest on things that maybe are second nature or just seem obvious. I'm trying
Mhm.
to not, maybe, like, if I have an idea and even if I like it, to maybe go, what else could be done? Or is this really the best? Or maybe you've done something like this before. What's a different way to maybe, think about how to deliver a chorus or think about where a song should go? And that's really,
Mhm.
and also just experimenting with different sounds and putting, I found that putting boundaries on myself, um, or giving myself sort of like new like rules of like, you can't don't start writing a song this way because you always used to do that. Try starting this way,
Mhm.
and I found that it's like sort of like birthed this like different aspect of creativity, like a different road to go down. So
Yeah. Okay. Um, so lyrically, many of your songs explore themes of faith, struggle, redemption. Um, what drives those themes? How does that connect? So,
yeah, yeah, no, it's right. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a large part. I mean, it's who I am. Um, like I said, I was brought up in the church, but that really that doesn't define who I am today. Because I had a massive crisis of faith when I was 18, 19 years old, because I just realized that I had just everything I knew, I felt like I knew secondhand. It felt like the telephone game, and I'd never actually looked into those things for myself. And in a sense, I just wondered, I was like, what do I actually believe? And
Yeah.
what am I convinced by? And so as I started just studying, I was a history major in college, and I taught high school history. So I just started studying history and church history and trying to understand, like, how did we get the Bible? Because there's lots of debate about, um, they call it like textual criticism as to like the legitimacy of, was it written when they say it was written? And I just started studying and learning a ton, and started becoming even like convinced in a way I was never convinced before, because I wasn't exposed to these things. And I think sometimes
Mm.
the idea of asking hard questions is kind of frowned upon, because maybe a lot of the people I was asking didn't know the answers, and I wanted to be sure, because the things that I was saying I believe have like massive implications. And so I think as like I was being changed and transformed, um, by really just seeing the gospel for what it is, and who Jesus is, and what he actually came to do and accomplish. It completely changed my life, because I realized I wasn't following a man who was telling me how to live. I was following who I believe to be God, who like came to die for me, because of my great need, for being saved. And so when I understood that and was convinced, that's really just like shaped who I am as a person. And playing music, what we're doing is we're expressing things that are important to us, and expressing ourselves in some senses. And that's really where all this has come from. Like, I'm really just sharing with people the things that I think about, and the things that um, I wrestle with, the things that I struggle with, um, the things that make me upset that I see in the world, the things that I'm upset that I see in myself, the things that
Mm.
I also, the ways that I've been helped and comforted, and despite my own weakness. And so really yeah, just an expression of who I truly have been changed to be. So
Yeah. So you've played alongside some pretty amazing bands. Are there any words of wisdom that you kind of picked up from them that's helped you along your way?
yeah, like one of the first ones I can think of was uh, one of our first full US tours. A band called Unearth was on that tour, and the singer said to me, he was being really kind, and was just saying, he's like, I think you guys are great, you're talented. And he just said, be nice to everybody on the way up, because he says you're going to see them on the way down as well. So he's basically saying bands rise and fall, and this is coming from a band, they've been around forever. um,
Yeah.
and so I thought that was a really neat perspective, that he had. um, I remember we toured with August Burns Red, and the thing that I just appreciate about those guys was, I actually got a chance to get to know them from when we were touring. And that's like a big part of what we loved about touring, was just like get to know the people we were with. And,
Hmm.
they're obviously an incredibly successful band, very popular. But
Hmm.
that was still important to them, and it's like you can never be quote unquote too big to like still just be who you are. And so that wasn't anything
Yeah.
they ever said, but it's just what they did. And I
Yeah.
yeah, I truly appreciated that. But man, there's so many things that people have I've probably just picked up a lot more from just watching people and seeing how they handle certain situations, or even just being inspired by their creativity.
Hmm.
So I'm just grateful that I could, whatever small place we have in this music scene, that we can be a part of it. So
Hmm. So your fans are very passionate about your music. How do you stay connected with them, both online and during shows? Do you
yeah,
kind of reach out?
people are always reaching out to us on social media, and as much as it's like the bane of my existence, the only reason why I have social media.
Yeah.
So if any fans are listening, I only have it for you guys. That is the only reason. Um, and I do appreciate when people try to connect with us, and you know, very rarely is there ever a time that somebody sends a message that I don't respond to. Because I remember I wish that I could have connected with some of the bands that I loved growing up, and would have loved to have asked questions of them. And so, as much as like
Mhm.
the accessibility can be like a little weird, I also just want to take advantage of that too, and, you know, connect with people. And then at shows, I mean, we're there, we don't hide, we always go out and meet people after the show and just hang out by the merch table and talk. And
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite things about touring, is being able to have that actual connection that way. And so many great conversations have happened, yeah, that way. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why, yeah, our fan base feels connected, is we do appreciate that aspect. So
Yeah. So what's one of the most memorable or profound fan experiences you've had? Is there anything that kind of stands out? Maybe a story someone told you or
yeah, I mean, I don't know I don't know how many like stand out in particular, but I've had the I've had the privilege of, you know, there have been fans who have been really struggling and reach out to me on social media. There's people who've struggled, with self-harm. There's people who have struggled, in really like hard and serious ways, and has just said, "What's your number? Can we talk on the phone?" And it's probably things like that that are kind of unseen, that I've appreciated, that I could just be who I am to this person, and it kind of fades away that I'm quote unquote Steve from a band, that we're just two people talking,
yeah.
and so I'm grateful to have been able to have that opportunity. But lots of people share things about how songs have helped them and encouraged them, and I know how powerful music can be in that way. And so the fact that we're able to do
Yeah.
that for anybody is just so cool. Because I still am impacted by music that way. I still feel like
Yeah.
a fan. Um,
Yeah.
so
What bands have you been listening to lately?
so I should pull up my Spotify
I
so
know
that.
it's funny. Someone asks you and you just like go blank.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is there's so much music out now, that it's hard to like keep track of everything you're listening to.
Hmm.
Um, and so actually I have a playlist that I title albums, because I just listen to albums. I try to discipline
Yeah.
myself in that way. Um, there's there's a new artist. He actually doesn't really have a lot of albums. It's a lot of singles and EPs, but it's just called Change the
Yeah.
World. And I thought
Uh-huh.
it's like new, he's a newer artist, but it's kind of like it's sort of like Deftones inspired, sort
Yeah.
of grungy. Um I think his music is pretty cool. Um I've been listening to so Josh Gilbert from Spirit Box co-produced the album,
Yeah.
and I've been
Yeah.
listening to their new album, which has been cool. That's finally out. Trying
Yeah.
to see what else I've been jamming. There's this I don't even, I guess it's like alt rock, but there's an artist named McGee who's like really kind of like left field stylistically, but it's so cool. It's like, especially as a guitar player, his guitar playing is just like really unique. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, his stuff has been really cool to jam. Um, yeah, lots of other stuff, but those are like those are the ones, those are like the newest of my listening.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the day list on Spotify?
The day list, no.
Yeah, so if you go to the Spotify search and type day list as one word, it should be the top thing that comes up, and it'll tell
Hmm.
you what you tend to listen to around this time of day. And
Whoa.
it's always a fun title.
You know, it is. It's most likely the stuff that my wife and my kids listen to during the day.
Yeah, it's
Because
about you.
I'm looking at it right now and I'm like, I don't really listen to stuff. I don't listen to like
Yeah.
any of this stuff. But thankfully my kids, they genuinely love our music, and they only ever want to listen to the stuff that hasn't been put out yet. So they always want to listen to the new
Yeah.
stuff that nobody's heard. So that they can't listen to that on Spotify.
Yeah. Um, and then my last question for you is there anything that you want fans to take away from your music, whether, a message from your music specifically, or maybe you
Hmm.
just want them to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I sincerely want people to interact with our lyrics in a way that it causes them to think. And um, I think part of like what I shared with you for my own sort of journey, because I wouldn't want anybody to believe anything because I'm saying it, but because it's true and that they search out the truth. And I really believe in, the power of what Jesus has accomplished on the cross. And I would want people to have a deeper understanding of who he is and what he has done. And a lot of our music is really aimed at hopefully pushing people in that direction. Not that we're covering everything you could possibly know about it, but that we could serve as a I guess an avenue for people to discover and understand the gospel message, um, and as well that people would be encouraged and have hope, because I think a lot of music um, kind of points out the problems that they see in this world or in their own lives, and it can be a bit fatalistic in the sense of like, I'm messed up, period. I'm broken, period. Um, and unfortunately, that can lead to a lot of really dark places. And I've just seen that from conversations with people. And for me, I have a real like burden and soft spot for people who struggle with self harm in that way, and um, would want them to understand that there's hope. And even if they can just get a little glimmer of that in our music, and it and can cause them to not, you know, bring themselves to places that they can fall into, and that they can actually find true hope in Christ, that would be yeah, amazing for me. So yeah, that's it. So
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
yeah, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
All right, bye.